Hi everybody, you're very welcome to today's tutorial on the Leaving Cert Economics tips and predictions for the 2023 paper. My name is Tony, I'm the economics teacher with ExamRevision. So I'll be going through just some general tips on how to go about answering the Leaving Cert paper this year with the revisions that are in place, the timing and structure of the exam, and then we're going to bring you through some patterns that we've seen in the paper so far. Unfortunately, I suppose the course is only new, so patterns haven't really developed too much, but we can still see from the few years that we have to work with that there is some style of questions that are coming up more often than others. I'll also be bringing through some topical questions, or some potential topical questions I should say, that have been prevalent this year in the world economy and Ireland's economy specifically. Again, these are just guidelines. These are by no means definites to come up, but they're areas that you could focus some extra study on if you can. So I suppose if we start with the layout of the paper for 2023, you should obviously have done your mock paper and it'll be the exact same as that. So in section A, which is your short answer section, you'll be answering 8 out of 10 questions. Within 8 of those questions, or within 10 of those questions I should say, you have an internal choice within 3. So they're answer an A and a B or C usually. And section B then is your long answer questions or extended response questions, and they are you're answering 4 out of 6 in those. Okay, so that means your total paper on the day is worth 300 marks. You will already hopefully have done your research project, which was worth 100 marks, so your whole economics exam is out of 400 marks in total. Okay, so that brings me to timing. You've 2.5 hours for your exam, which is 150 minutes. So if we break that down, giving yourself about 5 minutes, I think this 5 minutes is really important, so it's something I really focus on. At the start, just spend 5 minutes choosing your questions carefully, reading the paper and choosing your questions based on all parts. Bring a highlighter with you into the exam, highlight the keywords in the questions, and choose, especially extended response questions, what question you think you can maximise your marks in. So what I mean by that is, don't just look really quickly at A and B that you can do that and then move on and say I'm doing that question. Check and make sure you can do all parts of A, B and C. That's really important because students rush that kind of decision and then it's too late when they're in the middle of the exam. So that 5 minutes is really, really important to choose your questions at the start. Then you move on to section A, your short questions. If you allow yourself 32 minutes for that, so that's 4 minutes per question, which should be fairly reasonable for 8 questions. If you can, do all 10, but do the 8 to start off with and then come back to them at the end if you have time. Section B then is your extended response. That's leaving about 27 minutes per question, which I think is loads of time within that. I would imagine you will do most of those questions under 27 minutes, but it just gives you that extra time so you're not rushing things, and that still leaves you 5 minutes at the end to recap and read over any answers, or maybe potentially go back to section A and finish those last 2 questions because you marked on your best 8, or maybe if you've missed a part along the way that you can go back and read over it, or kind of fill that in. So I would stick to the time. Very, very important to stick to the time. If you don't finish the question, leave it and move on to the next one. Okay, because you maximise your marks early on in questions. So by you maybe keeping a couple of minutes extra on the end of a question, you're actually probably going to lose marks because you'll know more at the start of the following question. And as I said, you have that 5 minutes, so you'll have time at the end to come back if you need it. So for section A, generally section A are your very short style answers. So like things that have come up before generally are short answers, so keep it clear and concise. So what I've said there, no waffle. Must keep everything neat and tidy. You have space at the end of the paper if required. Just make sure you're right what question it is. So I'd always use state, explain, example. So SEE, that's your kind of motto for economics in general. State, explain, example. So the style of questions could be like, draw the long run average cost curve and explain its shape. That style of question. Topical questions can come up here maybe as well, maybe something about inflation, a little infographic based on maybe international trade or something from CSO, or some sort of graph. The HHI has come up a couple of times recently in that. So generally short, quick answers, maybe an elasticity equation. So it's usually very clear, concise answers. Alright, so as I said, no waffle. Keep it tight and keep it to the point. Section B then, said remember 4 out of 6 questions. These longer answers required here, so you're going into more detail. So again, use your state, explain, an example. Again, you're not given the marking scheme, but roughly 5 marks per point, give or take. Okay. What I always say to my students is, if they leave you a box where they don't give you a specified amount of reasons or specified amount of points they want, always aim for 3 or 4. Okay, don't, even if you think the box is small and you don't have enough space, don't just write in 2. If you know 3, put in 3. Go into extra space at the end if you need it. Okay, use pencil for the diagrams and always label the graphs clearly. Now these can be marked online, okay, so you can only use blue or black pen, but pencil is okay for graphs. But blue or black pen preferably then after that. So if you need that extra space, just go into that extra space at the end. But very, very important to label every question clearly. So if it's question 13A part 2, put that in and direct your examiner to that. Okay, and it's very important too that you keep everything within the boxes, because it only scans what's in the boxes. So don't think that you can just write underneath the box or just outside the box. Will only scan what's inside the boxes. So that's very important. That's why the extra space is there. Okay. So if we go on to some of the patterns that I mentioned, so these are the definite areas to cover. Okay. So if you look at every exam paper so far, and even go back to the old course and all the sample papers I'm sure you're looking at in your exam papers and your past papers, you're going to get something on demand, supply, or the equilibrium where they're both joined together. Okay, so I'd be actually focusing on some of the more tricky questions like excess demand and excess supply, and how you can get back to equilibrium from there. Okay, but there's no doubt that you're going to get a demand, or supply, or an equilibrium. The other thing to be aware of maybe is the questions like a shifting supply or a shifting demand curve, and be able to recognise the factors that affect demand and the factors that affect supply, and then apply them to real world examples. Okay, so something like the increasing demand for electric cars, what effect would that have on equilibrium? Okay, that style of question. Or a previous question was kind of the impact of fast fashion on the equilibrium position. I'll be looking at a rent crisis possibly this year for excess demand as well, so just be aware of those. Again, your market structures, your diagrams, so your short run and long run equilibriums for each market structure. There's no set pattern there. They are mixing the questions a bit, so I'd be very hesitant to say, if oligopoly came up last year, it's not coming up this year. I don't think that's an option for us. And what I've been saying to my students is learn off all your diagrams, because some of them are going, one of them or 2 of them are going to come up, and that's including the shape of your demand curve. Alright, and that's one that sometimes the students kind of leave out. So if you focus on the shape of the demand curve in perfect competition, imperfect competition, and monopoly, and be able to explain those, and then your short run and long run diagrams for all of them. Obviously bearing in mind that oligopoly and monopoly only have one equilibrium position. Again, fiscal policy and government intervention, they're big chapters. You're going to get a substantial amount on the paper really from those. So you're looking at taxation, you're looking at subsidies, you're looking at budget surplus, you're looking at how the government's intervening into the economy. Again, this is a real area where topical questions could come up. The government's opportunity costs for the government spending money on certain projects more than others. Balanced regional development maybe could come in there. Lots and lots. The housing crisis. There's so much there, and it's hard to predict. And it's a big topic. But again, focus on it. Looking at like direct taxation, indirect taxation, Smith's canons, etc. They're things I'd be looking at. Cost of production is always common as well. As I said, it's a handy short question. They might ask you to draw a graph. Economies, diseconomies of scale. Make sure you know those. Elasticity, again, can link in with demand and supply. Again, a nice one for short questions for your section A. A quick calculation style question. The other thing where elasticity comes in quite a lot is again linked in with government. How did the government use elasticity? How do businesses use elasticity? Links in with the budget very well. National income is very topical and has been, with the fact that GDP versus GNI. How is Ireland performing? Is our GDP overinflated because of foreign companies or multinational corporations? That's been in the news heavily over the last year. So again, that's something I'd be aware of coming up. International trade, again, obviously due to our energy crisis, the war in Ukraine and Russia, COVID, the effect of that, how impacted we are by international trade, how reliant we are on international trade. So again, these are all standard big areas that come up, and I'd be very surprised if you don't see all of those in some shape on the paper. Now, it's very hard to limit these, okay? So you are just going to have to look at the style of questions that have come up, like the ones I've mentioned, and we'll go into a little bit more on the topical side as well, okay? Just the patterns that I've seen so far, really. So these are all kind of new to economics compared to the old course. So your market concentration, if you go through the paper so far, we've seen the HHI come up every year in some shape or form. So I'd make sure I know that inside out. What hasn't come up yet is the 4-firm concentration ratio. I'd have that covered just in case they bring it this year. Sustainability is so topical that they're going to bring it up in some shape or form. Whether that's kind of like the HDI or Kuznets curve, just linking in with climate questions. Be aware that sustainability is not just the environment, that you're looking at social sustainability there and economic sustainability. Okay, but again, it's going to come up on the paper somewhere, so I'd make sure you know it in detail. And the other big one so far that we've seen is market failure. Okay, so things like externalities, asymmetric information, generic goods. We were looking at, like, so far we've seen cigarettes, we've seen minimum unit price for alcohol, housing I think came up in one of the mocks. So how do they become a market failure? Okay, so in other words, you need to learn what the conditions are for market failure. So your externalities, your asymmetric or imperfect information, your public and private goods, and your monopoly power. You need to match one of those answers to what the question asks you. So if you're talking about, for example, cigarettes, alright, cigarettes would be market failure due to an externality, due to a negative negative consumption externality. Okay, so that a third party is affected by people consuming cigarettes. So the healthcare services, taxes possibly increasing, and everyone's paying for that, even if you don't consume the product. So it's always a third party being affected by it. And it's been popular so far on all papers, so just be aware of that. Look at the style of questions that have come up previously, and they're usually topical again, so cigarettes, alcohol, housing, and link it in with what you know. Okay, and that's really the key to economics. It's applying what you know and what you learned to topical questions. Alright, so they'd be specific things that I would really focus on. I mean, make sure I can do. So in terms of the real kind of topical questions, right, and there's a lot here. So these could be things that basically I've been working on building up a bank of answers for. So I'm actually going to be doing an intensive revision course on the 13th, Saturday the 13th of May. so Saturday week basically. And we're going to be looking at these questions in detail. So I'm going to be giving you sample answers and notes and working through these systematically along with some other topics. Okay, so like the previous couple of slides I've looked at, I'm going to be working through those all systematically. But these are kind of real topical stuff that you're not going to get a whole full question on, but that could be mixed in and out of questions. So I don't think we're going to get away with this year's paper without seeing inflation somewhere. Okay, obviously building in the effects of the war in Russia and Ukraine there into that, and how basically has inflation been tackled with the rise in ECB interest rates, and it's actually the seventh rise has happened recently. So again, interest rates are going to be really topical. I'd be surprised if they're not on the paper some way. So like the style of questions that could come up would be the economic effects for the rise in interest rates, or how does the rise in interest rates affect mortgage repayments, that kind of stuff. The government budget surplus, again, they've got a hefty government budget surplus. Could come up maybe a question, the argument being, why does the government have a heavy budget surplus when we've such a housing crisis, when we've such a health crisis? Why aren't they spending the money? Maybe arguments in favour of that or against that. Something I do think is a real topical question, and it happened around on the paper will be regulation of the gambling industry. In the news quite a lot, in the news with sports teams, in the news with GAA. Recently Premier League sponsorship has stopped gambling sponsors on the fronts of shirts. So again, very topical, something to look at. The introduction of the coffee cup levy, so they're calling it the latte levy, which is going to be an extra 20 cent on buying a cup of coffee if you're not using your own cup. Again, maybe the implications of that, what are the advantages and disadvantages of it. The banking sector obviously, and that links in with rising interest rates and rising inflation recently as well. Mortgages as well, so KBC and Ulster Bank leaving the Irish market recently. What effect does that have on everybody? What effect does that have on the economy? What effect does that have on consumers? Implications of EU membership for Ireland. What are the advantages of Ireland staying in the EU? Maybe what are the disadvantages of Ireland staying in the EU? Looking at both of those. Again, has been topical ever since Brexit. Again, as I mentioned in the previous one, sustainability, you're going to get something on it. Climate change, the energy crisis, linking in with the war in Russia and Ukraine, electric cars, all that kind of stuff, very topical. International trade, Ireland's competitiveness, how are Ireland compared to other countries, how are we competing against other EU countries, against other countries in the world, why do we need to trade, all those reasons. Again, the rise in remote working, how is that affecting economies, how is it affecting workers, how is it affecting companies, the rise in contactless payments, again, what are the economic implications of this, the vacant house tax, again very topical since the budget, and something that's been pushed for a long time. And the last one I'm going to look at really is balanced regional development, and basically pushing for alternatives to Dublin. Okay, why do we need balanced regional development? How can we achieve it, etc. Okay, so that's just some of the style of questions that I'll be looking at in a lot of detail on the 13th of May. So again, hopefully you can make that session. It's all live on the ExamRevision website. Okay, so you can book online there. Okay, so that's just a quick hint, I suppose, to the overall paper and potential questions that could come up. As I said, Saturday 13th May, intensive revision course for 3 hours. We'll be going through all those questions, and you'll get a comprehensive notes package with all those questions on it and more. Okay, so that's all live on the ExamRevision website, as I mentioned. Maybe take a look at it if it's something you're interested in. Hopefully I'll see some of you there, but most importantly, best of luck in the exam. Don't stress, trust what you're doing, trust the process, use all this stuff to help you where possible, Look into, maybe if you feel that ExamRevision could help you more, look into the economics website. As you can see, I have videos done out for all the topics. There's sample questions done out, and there's notes for every topic as well. So if you feel like you're in that kind of last area where you need that extra push, maybe take a look at the website. But listen, best of luck to everybody, and enjoy the last few weeks of study. Thank you.